Hello and welcome to a special presentation of In the Money Media done in conjunction with our partners from Race Lens. We've got a fantastic offer I'm going to tell you about at the end of the video. Amazing discount on an annual Race Lens plan, as well as a full year's access to our In the Money Media Plus, where you'll get our Derby coverage that many have said is worth that whole fee alone, as well as digests of the picks through the year of the shows, as well as extra content. We've been doing extra shows every weekend. Lots of great stuff on In the Money Plus, plus that Derby and Breeders' Cup package. Stay tuned. We'll tell you about that at the end of the show. PTF and Matt Vagvolgyi, and we're here to talk about Race Lens, specifically the speed figure feature in Race Lens and how you can use that in conjunction with the rest of the Race Lens database to help find you profitable bets. Matt, how important is the speed figure tool within Race Lens for the handicapping and work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good compliment, right? It's something that it helps with other ways to look at, different angles and different pace scenarios, different trainers, horses, that kind of thing. I would say it's a great way to start in a general sense and then start to drill down. So I think we got some looking at it from a wider sense and then start to drill down and look at some more specific. I think it becomes really helpful of adding to your handicapping process.
Makes sense. Let's take a look at some of the numbers that you've pulled here. Talk us through what we're seeing on the screen right now and what you think is significant about it.
Yeah, so I mean, this is what I mean about starting very broad, right? So you're looking at, I brought it in with dirt sprints. If you do every race, absurd sample size. You're looking at dirt sprint, last race coming off their career figure, right? So the stat that jumps off the page in any just regular past performance daily racing form, right? How successful are these horses in the next race? You're looking at a monster sample, right? You're looking at over 22,000 starts in the last year. Now, what does the stat tell me? Like 16% wins and a negative 27% ROI doesn't really tell me one thing or the other, right? I don't think that's terrible, right? I think that's just jumping off the charts great with a sample size like that. I think it's pretty solid. But what it tells me is that I think it's worth digging in a little bit more to see if we can find some additional angles or adding some additional features to it to see if we can whittle that down and start to get into more what I call the white meat of a statistic that's going to help us with our traditional handicaping process. That's an example that I gave here of drilling down. Take that same sprint and let's look at not necessarily just start being the career best, but let's look at it from a progression standpoint. Let's look at it, the last three races, every race, the speed figure, the Equibase speed figure has gotten better. And you can see that stat starts to change, starts to become a little bit more interesting. Still a tremendous sample, over 10,000 races, but a nice 27% win percentage and a negative 12% ROI. Now we're starting to cook a little bit. To me, that's where I start to look at that and maybe drill down into the sheets and see, can I find anything more? But that's something that grabs my attention for sure.
This is very, very interesting. I would wager to you that 30 years ago, if you ran just last start career best speed fig, you'd have something much higher. I'm surprised the win percentage is actually as low as it is, just because we know that speed figures really help make the market. So I'd expect that to be closer to the average favorites winning percentage, which, as we know, in basically every study that's been done, 33 to these days, maybe 35% for with smaller fields with favorites. And it's interesting to see that what this tells me is there are some people still kind of maybe blindly betting it a little bit or overrating it with that minus 27% ROI. Like you said, there's signal here, but relying on that alone, that's going to get you absolutely nowhere in the modern game. I love the idea of confirming that, we talk about it. It's actually an English term they use all the time. This horse is progressive. Essentially, this figure is capturing that progressive, improving, getting better. And man, when you look at that 27% win, we're getting very close to that 33% you'd expect of a favorite. And all of a sudden, minus 12%, that's pretty darn good. As we've said before, a random bet these days loses way more than the takeout. A random bet probably loses minus 40%, honestly, at this point. But if you're getting to a bet that's minus 12%, nearly losing half of the money taken out by the house, all of a sudden your handicapping only needs to be half as good from there to find the ones that are worth betting on. So I think that's a really interesting stat as far as speed figures in dirt sprints go. You got another slide for us as far as speed figures, Matt?
Yeah. So again, taking a look kind of like pulling it a little bit deeper, right? Taking a look at just this site, like we look at it in different ways. Again, that same dirt sprints. We'll look at turf as well here, but look at again at the dirt sprint side of it. Career best speed figure. Let's look at the layoff, right? 8 to 30-day layoff, coming off that big speed figure, coming back right away. I ran this because to me, in general, just the I guess the simple idea is that they're running this horse back. They really think highly of this horse. They ran a huge figure, but they can come right back and do even better. Not necessarily showing that, right? So over the year, 834 starts, just 9% winners and a negative 33% ROI on that. So that's something, again, as a scenario of just a thought, put it to numbers, right, and see what it looks like. And this is one I expected to be different on in terms of the outcome on that. Actually came back a bit more negative than I anticipated. But then you look at it, like you mentioned about morning line favorites, right? That's something you can do on Racelens of actually adding in not only the morning line favorite, but also adding in what the off odds are. I do that a lot with first time starters.
Yep.
Like I'll take a particular trainer that's 5-1 or greater on the morning line, but goes off as the favorite, right? Something like that to see what those stats look like. You can do all of that again on Racelens, but looking at it on a turf sprint perspective, again, career best speed figure as the morning line favorite, you see those numbers really start to change, right? And logically so, but it's in line with what I would think, right? So you have one stat here that kind of goes against what I would think would be the expectation, and another one that does fall in line here. Again, 33% winners, negative 12% ROI is still not bad, but falls more in line with what my expectations would be on that.
In terms of that dirt sprint stat that you have up there, is that notable enough that you'll have Racelens flag those horses for you to bet against at this point? Or is it more just information you have in your back pocket to know not to get over reliant on ones that you like?
Yeah, well, one of the things in Racelens that I do like is that you can set the parameters of what is a negative angle and what is a positive angle just by color coding. So just by simply bringing up the home screen, you can see just running through the races, you can see angles that are showing up red, angles that are showing up green, which are positive. So you can actually go in and manually set that. This is something that I would go in and manually set as a negative angle, right? So if this shows up, it's going to go up in red. I'm going to be able to see it. But again, negative angles turn positive, right? I mean, the funny part is if you look at a lot of the angles I built over the years, I stopped doing this, but I've put negative in block letters in there and then whatever the angle is, and they've actually turned positive, right? So that's going to happen over time. So again, but I do like that though. Even just the simple color coding helps me to quickly visualize and see, okay, this is coming up as a negative angle. Let's see what that is. How does it make sense today? But yeah, Pete, it's something that I would pay attention to because, again, my general thought was they're very high on a horse like this, even though coming off a huge figure last time out, we're running him back fast. He's ready to go. Doesn't quite show up that way in terms of the win percentage.
Would you not bet a horse that had this angle? Would you bet less on a horse that had this angle? Would you actively seek out horses with this angle to bet against? How would you describe just sort of how you use this in your own handicap?
Yeah, I mean, how I would describe it, I get this question a lot. It's the sum of the parts, right? So this is one of the parts of it. This would be something where if I'm dealing with a very short priced horse, I'd probably look for other horses, right? So at least it's enough to get me to look elsewhere where I think I can find value. That is enough to at least let me look elsewhere. Now, if I look elsewhere and the field is absolutely atrocious and this horse can run their C race and get it done, again, that's why it's not just the quantitative side of what you're seeing. It is also the qualitative side of taking in what you're seeing in the past performances, how the race is going to set up, pace, etc. But to answer your question, Pete, this would be an angle that I would look, especially if it's a short price horse, I would look to go elsewhere to see if I can find some value around it.
Interesting what you were saying about angles changing. Some of that's just randomness. Some of that's the nature of markets, where if everybody starts betting against a certain angle, that ROI can flip on its head. Very, very interesting stuff to pay attention to. And it doesn't happen with every angle, of course, but I'm sure, there's a solid percentage of them that do. I did want to talk just for a minute about the turf sprint angle that you pulled. I love this angle because it's one of those things where when you have sort of your own anecdotal wisdom that you bring to the table. We all bring these little preconceived notions when we're handicapping. This one matches and validates one that I've had for the last several years. Ever since, I'll describe it this way, Jonathan Kinchin taught me how to handicap turf sprints. I used to struggle with them. I think I used to overly rely on closers because it always looked like there was a ton of speed, and you can do that in route races, especially on the turf, not so much in turf sprints. In turf sprints, essentially, the JK axiom about it is the horse with the best early speed and the best horse overall. This, to me, speaks to the power of the best horse overall. If they're the morning line favorite and they have the career best speed figure, that's probably what you're dealing with. And you're winning at a favorites type percentage, 33%. And again, only losing 12 cents on the dollar. We talked about how that makes your job as a handicapper essentially twice as easy when you're filtering that way. It's not going to be a blind bet by any means, but these are horses you can potentially rely on and press up in multi-race sequences. Matt will be back with another show soon that's going to look into what you might call the next generation of stats you can find during Racelands. I mentioned that offer early in the show. Here it is, folks. If you're going to be doing either one of these things anyway, buying ITM Plus or Racelands, do not miss this opportunity to be handed free money in themoneypodcast.com/Racelands. You can save $300 on the annual subscription. And at the same time, you get a full year of In the Money Plus. That's a $200 value. Again, many have said that just the Derby stuff or the Breeders' Cup stuff is worth the $200. You'll get extra stuff every single week. We hope that you join us. Until the next time, may you win all your photos